Right, it's a pleasant good morning again. Happy Sunday morning to you all. It's Sunday in Trinidad and of course in Guyana. Um, so we on well, I guess on the agenda we have to finish off. We were doing this. Yeah, I was just thinking about those on the World Wide Web because I have realized, right, our class is like 5 people, and I've seen 100 and something views. In fact, we get more views in this course than apparently some of the NEBOSH courses that have 20 students in it. So that means people worldwide are looking at it, and as I was just I pause a bit there to think about what to say. So if you have been seeing, I guess part two of this, and this would be part three of it, and this is like on the tail end of lesson two for the NEBOSH Environmental Awareness Award qualification, right? So we're going to go straight into it. On the agenda, we have to finish off. Let me take a good find it here for you. Some of the objectives here, and let me just pull this up a bit. Right. So we will really, I think we had done a lot of this scenario, right? We had done, I think when I checked, it was 8 slides remaining, right? So we had done the types of ways. I could recap in a bit, but let me just lay out the format for today. We are looking at finishing off, I guess, 8 to 10 slides on the second lesson. Those of us in the class, of course, will have the textbook if you all are, if anyone looking at this elsewhere in the world, but there is an approved NEBOSH textbook, and you can get this from the NEBOSH site itself. You could purchase yours if anybody's interested in getting that sort of information, or maybe contact us. You know, it's a Zoom class. You can join it anywhere in the world, and you can get access to these sort of courses anyway. The exam is online as well wherever you are at, in Guyana, in Trinidad, if you travel, Suriname, whatever have you, you can log on. And the exam is online. And so NEBOSH takes care of that. There's an online platform. You can get a link for that and you do the exam on that platform. So wherever you are, it doesn't matter which part of the world, Guyana, Trinidad, the other rest of the world anyway, we can get access to the exam. The exam consists of 20 questions, multiple choice, and you have to get 14 correct in order to pass. I think that's the correct percentage. I hope sometimes I mix it up with process safety. Let me just see, right? It's kind of shameful because I used to teach maths, but then that was a long time ago, right? I think it's just now. I think it's actually 12 you have to get correct. Yeah, 12 correct. If you get 12 correct, you get 60%. And 60% equates to, well, 12 then, sorry, equates to 60%, right? So my mistake, I stand corrected. I do have process safety a bit later on today as well, and they have to get 14 in their exam correct to pass, right? So you all are 12, and that would equate to your 60%. The point is it's 60%, so for you all it's 12, and that will be the pass mark, right? Let's make a start. So I think based on the fact that I could go, maybe until 11. We would finish before 11. So I don't mind doing a recap here. Even though this is on, I sent the recording to everybody already, and the recording is on YouTube. But the past paper then is only 20 questions. That wouldn't take us an hour, right? So whenever we are finished, we may finish a bit early today. Unless if I talk about NEBOSH some more, or talk about the exam some more. But I prefer do that at the end and get the work kind of behind us, right? So I think I'll take it back from types of waste. I would just review it. I wouldn't teach it again, and we'll kind of work our way down to the end of this slide anyway, right? So I'm going down there. If you have your books, maybe we could just show the page. You mightn't have it in front of you based on where you are at, but we can show some of the pages anyway, right? I'll show some of it on the book as well. So the types of waste. Let me just do one thing at a time, right? So I could only humanly possibly do one thing at a time. So this is on about page 68, right? Page 68, you have types of waste, and I would just recap it for you. So you probably see the same table here on page 69. You'd see um you probably see the same table on page 70 with clinical waste. We see radioactive waste, right? Now, the thing is that that's not really types of waste, right? If you look at this slide, there's categories of hazardous waste. So the types of waste, if I could run it here for you all, would have been classed as hazardous, right? And we have non-hazardous, hazardous, non-hazardous, right? And we have inert waste. And of course, some of these have their own subcategories, right? So non-hazardous and put non-HAZ there. That's the main types of waste. Um, I guess you'll have to follow through the slides or look back at the lesson, but I'm telling you, it's the three types here, and then we have inert. And what I was saying is that they do have regular questions on these, right? So like, like if I get to move the slide, you'll see like every sitting they will kind of give you an example of something and they will tell you like to put it in a category there, right? So the explanation here is that hazardous is anything that is bad then. So if you go back to hazardous, you see anything that is bad is hazardous. What you tell you'll see hazardous. Flammable. So once you start hearing those words, once you start hearing the words of yeah, too much light, right? Once you start hearing the words of flammable, corrosive, toxic, I mean, it sounds bad, right? Biologically hazardous, toxic to the environment. Fine, but then like it is multiple choice and you're not required to produce a definition for hazardous. So once you hear things, I mean, you should know that. Like when you hear things like, like strong acid, pesticide, there's no way in your mind you'll be thinking that's not hazardous, right? So that's what I'm saying is it's not a difficult question, but non-hazardous, we could think of those things as the things that could biodegrade, right? So non-hazardous could include things like household waste, paper, cardboard, clothing materials based on the dyes and stuff that they use. But non-hazardous could be thought of here as like biodegradable waste then, right? Leaves, grass cuttings, vegetable peels, etc. So from last week we had mentioned what was in it. Anybody could remember what was in it? So if hazardous is what is like toxic and flammable and non-hazardous is like biodegradable, what is inert waste? Give it a try, somebody. It's only three, four of you all here, so somebody have to give it a try. We have Ijaz, we have Nikisia, we have Anne, and I have somebody else that I don't quite know. Samsung SM, probably somebody with a double device, hopefully. Anyone? What's hazardous waste? The world is watching. So what is sorry, what is inert waste? What is inert waste? Okay, well, I will need it to take part because we have a passive session coming up just now too. Anybody want to give it a try? Let's hear from, I'll pick on, I think Ijaz dropped out. Let's hear from Ijaz, but I think he left. Well, it's going to be Nikisi. I know he's a bit on the sleepier side. What about Anne? And if Samsung, I don't know if she does Ijaz as well. What do you all say?
Morning, sir. Can you please repeat the question? It's Shalane.
Oh, Shalene, my mistake here. Thanks for the answer though. I think Anne is on work. That's why she cannot, she would have messaged out, right? I was asking her, but we have just done what. Well, not just that, we did it last week too, right? What is hazardous, what is non-hazardous? But anybody remember, just I mean, just to give a feedback, it doesn't even have to be correct. Just as a feedback anyway. So like what is inert waste? What do they mean by inert? Because you see a question there, so that's why I have to stick there because it like inert is a weird one. Inert is a strange one then. So what is inert waste?
So would it be the release of waste that somewhat decreases oxygen level?
Okay, thanks for the
Sir,
answer. I'll give you the answer in a bit.
sir,
Anybody else? Ijas?
yeah, I need to make a try on here.
Yeah,
It's a
Sean.
stable waste, something that is stable and cannot like dissolve anything
Yeah,
of this sort, like
yeah,
bricks.
yeah,
Um,
very good. So that would be it, right? Anybody else want to have a go at it? So, like the reason for pausing on that is because you see the question, right? So it's not that I want to pause on it, it's because I know that's a weird one. I think we could all figure out hazardous and non-hazardous. But inert is like waste that doesn't do anything, right? It just stays on, like if you have land, it just stays on your land. It doesn't really do anything. 10 years pass, it's still there, but it doesn't biodegrade it, nor does it contaminate the surrounding. It's like a clean brick, right? Or a clean glass bottle. Glass doesn't actually, well, glass doesn't degrade then, right? It may if there's a fire and the fire heats it and it melts back, melts into, something else anyway. But if there was no fire, then it just stays there. It just stays like people would have time capsules, like you have a time capsule, you put some pictures in a glass and you put it in the ground and 10 years from now you come back and you open up that. You put new newspaper clippings and stuff, right? And that's a good idea. But the thing is, like that doesn't do anything. It doesn't contaminate the ground if you have like a time capsule, right? So whatever material they use is some sort of glass or carbon based steel or whatever have you that's classed as inert waste. It's just there. It doesn't do anything, right? And it really is non-hazardous then, nor does it have any hazardous properties, right? So that's why I said there was a question here, which is an example of inert waste. We did this last week. We did the same question, right? So from this, I'll just go to today's work, right? So we have clean bricks from a demolition site, grass cuttings. Well, grass cutting would be non-hazardous glass bottles that have been used to hold chemicals, and that's kind of telling it that it may be hazardous. Cardboard would be non-hazardous. So by deduction, if all of these are, hazardous or non-hazardous, but then the clean bricks, and like they
Yeah.
said, clean bricks, right? And that would be inert, right? Just repeating what I said last week too. Like I saw another question on this where they switch this up, they switched this and they said bricks from a demolition site. So you gotta be careful. And then they said clean glass bottles. And they didn't really say that it used to hold chemicals. It just said clean glass bottles. So then the thing was, if it was bricks from a demolition site that had chemicals, so they kind of switch it then. So they would have switched it a bit, I guess maybe to trick students who would have seen this question anyway. But the idea here is clean. And if it's clean, well then it is going to be inert anyway, right? Any questions, anyone? I
No,
had to
sir.
repeat it. Yeah, okay. Thanks very much, Nikisa, right? I had to repeat it because the emphasis is on the past papers now. And again, I told her I wish I could look even the thing I mentioned at the start of the hour there. I wish I could do some of these courses myself, but I can't do it, right? So you all have the benefit of it. The waste hierarchy, if you were not here, please remember you need to learn this, right? Yeah, we do have some time, right? Please remember you have to learn this, the waste hierarchy. They need to learn it because what they do, they mix it up, right? We did a question last week too. They would say reuse is the second most important element in the hierarchy of control, and that's not true. Reuse is third. Then they say things like recycling is the best option, and a lot of people put that correct. We already dealt with this last week though, but that's a re-emphasizing the fact that these are possible questions. So recycling is not the best. Preventing is the best. Even reducing is better than recycling. Look, recover is recycling, right? Keep in mind to learn the hierarchy, right? So let's go straight to where we would have picked up today's work, right? So I think today's work is right about here. We would have left it there. We did that one too. So yeah, it's just you see just 8 slides, so that's until we'll finish it. So let's take it up from right here. We did this question too, right? And this was here, like, which would be the preferred method for dealing with empty cardboard boxes used to deliver paper to an office? Burning, collection by the local authority for landfill disposal, collection by the local authority for recycling, reusing the boxes. But like for those who hear last week, this is actually a hierarchy question. This is actually this. Sorry, exactly this. So when they say landfill, but landfill is not first, landfill is last. When they say recycling, recycling is not first. When they say reuse, now reuse is the better option. You see it here, best option. The best options come from the top, come the way down. So if you see reuse, which we did see, then that is the best option. The answer is not recycling. But recycling, you get it wrong. Now, you have to be careful because next thing you see in your sitting, you only have recycling. Right? So if you, which I don't think because you see recycling is kind of low on the hierarchy. a lot of things are actually better than recycling. Watch it, recycling is way down here. So to give a question for 4 answers now, you may have landfill, you may have reduce, you may have recycling, you may have reuse. In that case, the best answer is reduce, right? Hence, you have to learn the hierarchy, right? Let me try to finish up the slides and I'll just chat a little bit about just 5 minutes and I will kind of get into a past paper, right? So typical environmental incidents, we have spillages. If you could line it up with your book a bit, you'd see 2.6 waste management, right? Waste management. Actually, no, it's 2.7, right? 2.7, dealing with environmental emergencies, right? So we have spillage, fire, flooding, equipment failure. There are around 3,000 spills of oil and fuel in 2012, or there were around 3,000 spills of oil and fuel in 2012 that were reported to the UK Environmental Agency, right? Chemicals and plastics may catch fire and release toxic fumes. Water from firefighting appliances may flush hazardous chemicals into the drainage system or local water course. Well, I mean, just to talk about the region of Trinidad and probably Guyana, I could talk from experience because, I told you I worked at the state-owned company here in Trinidad, Petrotrin. Of course, Petrotrin has been sort of renamed anyway now. But back then, when I worked in it then, there were lots of oil spills, right? And this is from me being in the oil pits, yes, right? Me being in the rivers, like trying like what they would do because I worked with a contractor, right? So it wasn't any big position. I think I told you that. But like when oil would have been spilled then, right? Sometimes huge spills, right, will get into the rivers. And what they would hire the contractors to do would have been to take chemical. Well, we do different parts of it, right? So it's a long thing. But so they will have to tap that river wherever the oil is at, right? Tap the river then, right? Like block the river, block the water course, right? And there are collection areas like around the oil field industry where rivers are at, where you can tap the river then, right? And collect the water and the oil into some pits, right? Pump the oil from the pits, right? Bleed out the water, as they say. Let the oil stay in the pits, and then you pump that oil back into some tanks, right? If it is, and then, trucks and whatever have you, transport trucks will come and take the oil, but there were different stages of it. And like one of the stage of it was the visible oil in the river would have been something that the company didn't want then. Because that is like a bad reputation. Residents will see it. It would end up in, well, Trinidad has, I mean, it's beaches and stuff as well as an island, right? So it end up in fishing beaches. If anybody here, well, I know probably Ijas, there's a beach south of the island, which is where like all the rivers will end up there then, right? So all the rivers south of the island, it ends up into a couple of beaches, right? You have Lucero Beach. Those of us in Trinidad will probably know Ijas. You have Queenam, but you have Beach Camp, right? And then you have Erin Fishing Beach. And Erin Fishing Beach is like the beach where the oil would end up. So there would be oil in the fishing boats. But like I said, long story short, what they hired us contractors to do, in addition to catching the oil in what is called like an oil catchment or a dike, would have been to take a chemical and anybody know where I'm going with this? You take a chemical and they would spray the chemical. Literally, like we would stay on the bridge and the river is passing over the oil and you spray, you sort of release the chemical on the surface of the water then. And what that did was that it sank the oil. No, that didn't mean it get rid of the oil. It sank the oil to the bottom of the river so that nobody could see it. Right. So, I mean, I think since then to now, they may have been better chemicals, but I'm talking from my experience that they may have been chemicals that demulsify the oil, but that one back then would have sunk the oil. And a lot of people, a lot developing countries still use it because you see it all the time. You see it where there's a spill on this like the ocean and not a water course like a river, but the ocean, and then it sinks to the bottom and gets into the coral reefs and stuff. So I'm not too sure if those things are still being used. But like I said, they do have a lot of oil spills that probably go unrecorded then, right? So like, it doesn't reach like the environmental authorities, right? Guyana, Trinidad, because some of it is actually sunk by contractors anyway, right? Anyway, pumps
Is that
and
the same chemical they use? They call it dispersants. They
yes,
put
this person, I don't
dispersant.
if I put my mind to it, I could remember the names of those chemicals, and that's kind of scary, yeah. I could remember the names of those
It's
chemicals,
something
and
like it's like something like a powder, and they spray through a
yeah,
compressed
yeah,
hose like,
yeah.
and it spreads around.
Yeah, I have seen in Trinidad here, we have some new when I say new, I mean like I am out of that field more than a decade now, right? But like I've seen companies that have like a sort of chemical that is biodegradable. So I don't know if it interacts with the oil, and like whatever happens, whatever reaction happens, what that mix there is biodegradable. Well, fine, well then that's good, right? I mean, that's like what you want anyway, right? And they market that. I think they normally come up at these AmCham safety week and stuff you have in Guyana and Trinidad, and they demonstrate to you how if there's a spill, they can add their chemical and it demulsifies the oil and renders it biodegradable. And of course, that's the best thing anyway. But that would not have been my experience, right? And my experience would have been more than that, more years than that. And like I said, even here, I know like those spills were never recorded. It was, but not like never reported then because the contractors sank it before the media could have realized what was going on there, right? So pump and valve failures are a common source of pollution incidents associated with sewage treatment. Oils and other fuels or other hazardous liquids stored on your site. A lot of the like in the oil industry, it is stored on site, right? If so, how are they stored? Do you think that they are stored safely, right? And for chemicals, for tanks, right? I mean, which is the oil field industry for tanks, you really want like a bonded area, and most companies that have like a double bond, like if you're in a tank, again, which is my experience, a tank on a location is like where you have the oil anyway. There'll be a pit, and then that pit normally is connected to another pit. They call that bleeding. It bleeds into another pit. And, so if there's a spill, you have your primary bond, you have a secondary bond. And of course, hopefully, some, supervisor would have noticed that spill. And once the bond starts to fill up, then, they will have their pumps and stuff to kind of pump it into a waiting transport trucks. Yeah. You see, so I do have oil field experience. I didn't mention that. I spent a large portion of my early days in the oil field anyway, right? And I can tell you more detailed things, but that's what topic another topic that would have to tie into that then, right? So environmental incidents can cause pollution through the release of harmful materials into the atmosphere, land, and water. Air pollution, smoke may contain toxic gas particles. Water pollution, contaminated runoff can reach rivers and streams. Land pollution, kill vegetation, and contaminants may be transported by groundwater, right? And we had mentioned some of that already. So planning for environmental emergencies involve identifying the most likely accident scenarios, designated someone to take charge, a central location for site plans, readily accessible inventories of hazardous materials, right? And that's to tell, like if there is a spill, like what it is and how do we deal with it. But the idea here, if you look at the heading, is that the company must have an emergency response plan. And that may involve, like I said, contractors, bonds, spill kits. Spill kits could be huge, right? I've seen huge spill kits, buoys, like if it's in a water course, they'll put like a flotation device on the water. So how I said like to capture the oil then, right? So they will cordon off the ocean then or cordon off the river, right? So they capture the oil and then they will start up their pumps. This is how they do it. They start up their pumps and they'll pump up oil and water, right? Remember, you can't pump oil alone. If you're looking to capture oil and if you're looking to capture oil floats on water. So you pump up oil and water, put it into a tank. Oil floats on the top of the water, so then you drain out the water and the oil remains in the tank and there's a lot of mimicry that is involved with that anyway, but that's something else, right? So the idea is that you must have an emergency response plan in place, right? Telephone numbers for gas, water, and electricity suppliers, and maybe your disaster management unit, the environmental agency in Guyana, the environmental agency in Trinidad, even though some companies, would want to deal with it before even, it gets into that sort of stage anyway, right? Because if you report to the environmental agency and something would have gone wrong, you're going to get a fine anyway, right? Methods for advising local residents, businesses, and any other parties likely to be affected. That's part of your plan. It should be. In most cases, it's not, right? A part of your plan should be informing the residents, look, we have a chemical release, right? Or we have had an oil spill, right? And it's getting into the river because there'll be a smell, right? Rivers run close to people. I guess you all know that, close to residents, whatever have you. Most of the times, locally, I'm talking about Trinidad context and maybe Guyana. So most of the times, you only know that there's a spill when some residents start to complain of the smell of oil in the river or something like that. And even around the world, there would have been disasters like Bhopal, India, where there would have been a release of gases, metal isocyanates, and they didn't tell anybody. In fact, that's how it has so much of people died. Even in Russia, well, Ukraine, which where you have Chernobyl, right? Even where you have radiation leaks. So it's like it's not just Trinidad and not just Guyana then, right? When disasters happen, a lot of companies don't inform anybody, right? Look how I called Bhopal was in India, but it was an American-based company. There was one called Flixborough, that's the UK. Like the last people to know is the residents. Like you only know when you start to get affected. But the companies know it, and the companies know when they have a spill. The companies know when something happened, but they try to kind of keep it under wraps, right? But a good idea is, advising the local residents, not just good planning. I think it's just good for reputation anyway. But perhaps, like I said, I can't really give an explanation for that. I think it's good planning. It should be done, but around the world, I said locally here from my example. But look, I called 3 other countries in the UK, Ukraine, India with an American-based company, and they didn't inform the residents. And that kind of escalated the damage in terms of Flixborough, but even escalated the death count in Bhopal, India, and in Ukraine anyway, right? Materials and equipment to deal with pollution incidents. So most organizations are likely to have firefighting equipment, or you would have access to the fire services or your disaster management unit. If hazardous chemicals are stored on site, spill kits must be placed at each location. I said they're huge spill kits. I don't know how to describe huge here. Huge is huge. Huge is about probably the size of this room that I am in. It's based on like what you're doing then, right? So if hazardous chemicals are stored on site, spill kits must be placed at key locations. These typically contain chemical resistant gloves or PPE, absorbent mats, and I said those could be huge because you could cordon off, water courses with them based on what the risk is. Cushion, socks, wipes, shovels, and bags. And in some companies, they actually use sand. Yeah, sand actually works good with oil. Like if there's an oil fire, well, sand is, I guess, reminiscent of powder then, right? But they used to have, again, I haven't been in the oil sector for a long time, but they used to have on every location what is called a sandbox. So you had the extinguishers, but it'll be a box of sand. When I say a box, right? It's like about the size of a skip, which is a garbage collection unit, like the big skips, right? So these have at each location, and yeah, there will be a shovel and stuff, attached to that unit anyway. So in the event, and I have used it if there's an oil fire, sand. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. Sand is an excellent means. Is a like there's a reason why I do it with my hand like this, right? Because you take the shovel with the sand and you there's a technique to it, right? And you sort of spray the sand, and sand works really good on oil, right? So I guess it's reminiscent of a powder extinguisher anyway, right? Training is essential for effective response to environmental emergencies. Who should be trained? The answer is everybody in your emergency plan. If it's like someone to use the extinguisher someone to use, whatever powder material they have, a first aider, right? A rescue team, everybody should be trained, someone to deal with the media, someone to take charge, that's called an incident commander, right? What should the training cover? And I just kind of shouted the different things the training should cover, right? Contacting emergency services is first priority. It is, so the emergency services is the fire services, the environmental authority, should be. I told you most people don't call them because there's a fine attached to that, OSHA. Um, if you have a disaster management unit in Guyana, maybe regional, sorry, I think you'll say county council, right? Like the UK also say county council or regional corporations. If anybody's listening to this, those entities represent like a local management office then, right? Like every district has like a management office to deal with environmental stuff. Really not environmental stuff, should I say residential stuff, things like drainage, flooding, grass cutting off the roads, sweeping the roads, I guess in the UK and in different parts of the world. They don't really sweep the roads in this part of the world, but they sweep, you have like road sweepers and stuff. But there's like a local district then, right? And in England, they say county council. I think you will say council or county councils in Guyana to Trinidad. We say regional cooperation, right? So they do tend to have some means of like emergency preparedness, so you can contact them and then they may liaise better with the fire services, the police, OSHA, whatever have you, right? So it's a good idea to get them involved, right? Local residents would need to be informed about any incidents that might affect them. If there's a potential pollution incident to reach a water course, the environmental regulators may need to be informed or should be informed. But as I said, of what happens in developing countries and even the other countries, so there's some sort of penalty then for informing the regulators because there'll be a fine coming out of that, right? Two more sites ago, emergency plans to deal with media should include identification of one or two senior workers, ensuring other workers do not speak to the media, providing appropriate media training, right? So the idea here is that, now this is a question you'll see it on the slide coming up. The idea here is that only trained person should talk to the media, right? Most big companies, should I say, have what is called a communication specialist, right? And what is released in the event of a accident, or in this case, environmental spill or some sort of, gas release, would have been like a technical statement, right? They would say like, we are investigating, we would do our best, right? But you don't really get anything too much out of that statement, right? And the idea is to protect the reputation of the company. Most companies, again, yeah, that's a paid position, just in case you don't know. They are degrees in communication and master's degrees in communication studies, and those persons would end up going on to be employed by various companies as a communication specialist, right? So that is somebody who is trained. But I do think if you don't have that, well, then you may want to just have the knowledge then that not everybody should talk to the media, and it should just be someone that is competent, right? So when you look at the answers in a bit, you'll see various. This is a question, it wouldn't be the same question, but um, there's always like the last question. How this is the last slide. There's always like the last question is on communication, like who should talk to the media. Let's have a look at one, and we're gonna go straight into the possible, right? So which of the following statements is true? Accidental oil spills are a significant source of water pollution. That sounds true, but that's really rest, right? Emergency plans are only required for large organizations. That's not true. So B is off. Following an environmental incident, all workers should be encouraged to speak freely to the media. So that is also not true. We just spoke about having a designated person, right? D, so C is wrong. D, the person who first raises the alarm should take charge of any environmental incident. And that's not true either because, I mean, God forbid, the person that raised the alarm could have been a customer, right? So a customer could have noticed, look, there's a fire and they shouted fire. Or a customer could have been driving into your compound and realized, look, it have some sort of oil in your drain. It'd be like we are seeing oil gushing out, right? And then everybody's inside the office, and it's like nobody knows. right? But that person who raises the alarm should not take charge because that person is not going to be competent unless they say that the person was an employee and competent, right? So the best answer here is actually E, right? And ladies and one gentleman, that is the end of the NEBOSH Environmental course. Such a good course. By the way, this is the first time I taught this for the year. We normally put a heavy emphasis on the other courses, right? And it was good to teach it because sometimes it's a break for me. Yesterday, someone I was at my office and they said, "So wait, now you teach the same thing like more than once a day?" I say, "Yeah," right? But I was telling them sometimes like what is some comfort is that it's not the same lesson then, right? It's like I would have taught, like maybe risk assessments yesterday about 1 o'clock, but then about 9 o'clock I taught culture. So it's the same course and everything, right? Even for the degree, right? Some of the work is kind of similar then, right? So if you teach management systems at level 3, management systems in the degree is the same thing. But the degree is a bit refreshing to teach because it's new work, some of them being old work, right? But courses like these are excellent because to me then it's kind of interesting for me and you will see how I get to share my environmental stories as well, which I don't share with anybody else because it's not part of what we talk about, right? Also, like I said, the oil and gas is coming up. If you all came in here a bit late today, um, I would just mention that we are going to have the NEBOSH, yes, the real oil and gas started in September if anybody is interested. We don't have seats for everybody. I have 18 more seats to fill. I only mentioned it yesterday. And we haven't, I mean, yesterday was Saturday. I have two of my students on it. So we have 18 more seats to fill. The real NEBOSH oil and gas, not the one we do at the New Guyana School, not the introduction, but the real one. It's about 6 weeks. We will do it on Zoom and we'll see how we can get the exams done, right? Where that is concerned, right? It may be somewhat technical for the folks in Guyana, but I am gonna say technical. We are going to have an exam. We'll have to have this is a written exam, right? But we are going to have an exam in Guyana because I have sort of like some companies in Guyana to get it done. So I guess whenever we get that exam sorted out there, the venue then, right? Whoever did the oil and gas in Guyana will sit the exam at that facility anyway, right? All right, nonetheless, let's make a start. So I did send you this past paper. There isn't much around. Now it have some around because somebody told me, but not this course. Yeah, was process safety. Somebody said they saw some, but they are all question papers then, right? So since the pandemic, you all know these exams went online. And because of that, we don't get the scripts anyway. This is actually one I think from the syllabus NEBOSH had anyway, right? This is one of the first past papers I think course providers were given, right? So this is what I'm going to use. But to say then that we have regular students in the environmental, no, this may be the only class unless if a company books me. I'm not going to push environmental again for the rest of the year, right? And so this may be the only class for the year. And then last year didn't have any. The year before was the pandemic. 2021 was still, the height of the pandemic. 2020 was the height of the pandemic. So like this, like I said, was such a good course to teach, but isn't much past papers then, right? But there is one, and they do bring questions back from this anyway, right? So that's how it is. If you see any online, please do them and take them. And I mean, not like knowledge is all good. Nothing is wrong with that anyway, right? Knowledge is all good. If there's another school, right? Somebody's telling me somewhere in India they saw process passive, but that's well, all good, right? I mean, if it's a question, take it, study it, have a look at that lesson because it's all good knowledge anyway, right? All right. So I would probably need your help with this, right? If it's just a guess, and if you have your paper, you could put the answer. If not, what you could do, well, of course, if you have a pen and paper around, if not, you can play back the recording. And you can just put like number one then, right? Like what the answer was, number two, like number one, C, number two, B, whatever. You can put it like that. And then when you get some time, when you fully recover and wake up, you could actually fill it out anyway, right? So let's take a look. So weather is A, global warming, B, climate change, C, current meteorological conditions, D, atmospheric smog. Which one do you think is the best one?
C.
C, okay, good. So let's go. So the answer is C. Thanks for the answer. We'll go down again. And Missy, I think somebody put one in the chat. If you could shout them for me, that'll be good, right? Because instead of having to check the chat all the time, right? So number one, C. Number two, so I'm not sure if you understand what's happened with the paper. You see the first set of questions come in the first set of slides. And as I was saying, like the last question would probably be on communication. It kind of go like the same idea of the slide there, right? Like the first couple of lessons was, what was weather? If you open the book, you'll see it. If you had the book in front of me, the first couple of slides was what was weather, right? Look at there, just about the first, look at it, that's the first page there, right? So what was weather? And they kind of go to that same thing then. So like by the time I reach about question 10 and 11, I think they'll probably be into hazardous waste and stuff, right? A good example of an ecosystem is a farm, a factory site, a tropical rainforest, a rural village. So this shouldn't be hard. The best answer here again is what?
C.
C, right? Just let me get a minute here. Right? Anybody have any other ideas? Any other ideas they think?
I'll say C too.
Yeah, I'll say it's C as well,
Oh.
right?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, let's go again. Number three. So it's not a hard exam, and as I tell, I wish I could have done these things, but I do have the license, so that's kind of comforting, right? Let's try another one. So this one here is which is not just give me a minute, huh? I'm trying to set something up here. Yeah, so which is not an example of sustainable development, right? We have preventing pollution, using natural resources sensibly, environmental legislation, promoting ethical trade. Now that's a sort of tricky question, right? I don't know if you want to have, they are going to have questions like that, right? Which is not an example of sustainable development. So we're going to have to take off what is sustainable development, right? So using natural resources sensibly, this is sustainable development, but they don't want that. They say, which is not an example of sustainable development, right? So this is not the answer because this is sustainable development. What do you think about preventing pollution? Could that be classed as sustainable development? What do you all think? Yeah, I think it could be, right? And so, so then that may not be the answer either, right? So what about environmental legislation? Right? What about environmental legislation?
No, sorry, I don't think this is the answer. I think D. I'm leaning towards D more.
Right. So what I did, I wanted to Google it. Sorry, I wanted to show you now because then if I say so ethical trade now, so I'll read it for you here. So what is ethical trade, right? So ethical trade, they say the term ethical trade first gained currency in the mid-1990s, where it is used as a term for socially responsibly sourcing, like materials then like we did that when they had the example of B&Q that was sourcing forest timber then for their furniture, right? So ethical trade addresses the ethical aspects of organization, including worker welfare, agricultural practices, natural resources, conservation, and sustainability. So ethical means like you're doing the right thing then. So the answer cannot be ethical trade either. You catch that, folks? Because ethical means you are doing the right thing, the acts which is not sustainable development. Ethical means you're doing the right thing. Like, the example of B&Q, then you source the furniture material, but you source it then from well-managed forests, right? So we are down to two. We are down to No, of course, remember you wouldn't have Google and stuff for the exam. That's why these questions are important. Um, Out of preventing pollution and environmental legislation, I would have to say environmental legislation, right?
Yes.
But environmental legislation wouldn't also help to sustain the environment in terms of development, how we use the resources that we gain from the environment and how we protect the ecosystem as well, all comes down to the same thing.
Yeah, and so that's like this one may have two very close answers. So that's why some multiple choice is tricky then, right? And that's what I said, like studying is a part of this exam then, right? You have to sort of study to kind of get some part of it out, right? So like when you go through the question, I think preventing pollution would be sustainable development. Remember what the question was. The question asked, which is not sustainable development. But preventing pollution in a way is
But I think
going to be,
preventing pollution will be the answer here to this question.
okay, you think that. But
Yes.
how they see it in the UK, how they see it in the UK, let me see. But I don't, like I said, I don't, how I know the UK think though, they think in a way that the environmental is the least that you can do. But I could agree, like what did the rest of you all say? I could agree that, you see, this question is vague. Like if they had said, like the legislation was meant, just a UK mentality that I suppose if you look at it with our the UK mentality, which is in the UK, they look at the law as the least you can do, right? The law is the least you can do. So the law is not the most you can do. The law is the least you can do, right? What say the rest of you all, right? Is it preventing pollution or environmental? I could see it as environmental legislation, but I have to think not like you have to think not how the UK says. You have to see like environmental legislation is proactive then. But preventing pollution is a bit reactive, so which is not sustainable. I think the best answer here, what the rest of you all say? Let me hear the rest of you all.
So
I
I
think
feel
I'm
I
leaning
would,
towards A. Yeah.
eh?
A? Okay.
I feel I no, I feel like going to C.
I still going with C.
I'm looking at it on the perspective when it comes to C, that if I give an explanation in C, in Guyana here, our environmental
Legislation
the
is,
po-
legislation
it's
is a bit
enforced
proactive, yeah.
and yes. Why I'm saying that, because there are so much things on the vessels, even with companies here who generate a lot of cause a lot of, like, say, noise pollution, dust pollution, and all of those things. They
Yeah.
have to get different criteria they have to go through in terms of the environmental, and it falls in with the legislations that we have in place.
Yeah.
And they have to have like quarterly air testing, noise testing, those kind of things coming through from the department here when it comes to environmental pollutions.
Yeah. Like I said, the thing is here is how you see there's a difference in perspective from England to here then. Like we see laws. I'm still leaning towards A. I just debating it in my brain. Like we see laws as a big thing here, but in England they see laws as a minimum requirement. Now, to me, even if it's minimum, it still is proactive. It still is going to protect it still is sustainable development, right? But you see, this is a tricky question because there are two sort of correct answers here. Like I said, and we don't have the answers for these, right? It's just, our educated guesses anyway, right? If I don't think like the UK, I would say A is the answer, right? Because I can still see, they say, which is not sustainable, you know? This is what makes this tough for me is I see some legislation didn't have to say it was sustainable. Wonder if you'll get that. Like a legislation may have said a fine. A legislation would have said, environmental legislation would have said, if there's a spill, you get a fine.
Great.
But then, is that really sustainable when you consider that to preventing pollution, right? But then preventing pollution is reactive, right? So I'll probably just go with the obvious one, which is preventing pollution.
All right,
This
before you
statement
touch
to
on
me,
that,
yeah.
in my opinion, right, I
Yeah.
had marked when I did the paper to send to
Yeah.
you, I had put D, promoting
Yeah.
ethical trade,
No, no.
because I
Yeah.
look on the perspective here, how the
Yeah.
people do business in some areas. If they don't pay attention, they totally ignore how we should keep the environment.
Yeah, but you say
How this is
promoting ethical
sustainable.
trade. So if you
Yes.
promote that, well, that's sustainable, right? So
Yes.
at surface value, if I don't overthink, and you see there's a reason for me overthinking because you see they didn't say what the legislation is. If you have a legislation that speaks to sustainable development, fine. But if the legislation is just fines and penalties, in a way it is a minimum requirement, but this is proactive. This is proactive if you think of it like that, which is not sustainable. Sustainable development is good. Let me try to break it down, right? All of these are kind of good. Using natural resources wisely is good. Environmental legislation is good. Doing this is good. So if these are good, but then this one must be the bad one. But then they say preventing pollution, which is still kind of good. But out of the rest of them, this may be the one that is probably the odd one anyway. Now, here the trick with this, right? Here the trick with this. Well, not this. Here the trick in general. The trick in general is that the exam is only half an hour long. You see how we kind of like that day you have to just kind of put the best possible answer, right? You just have to put the best possible answer for this anyway, and move on because like the length of time we spent on this one is only half an hour. You have to do the 20 questions, right? Let's get to number 4. And there are some like that. Like if you come across a question like that, maybe it may make sense. Keep a check on your time, right? Just let me do this again, right? So keep a check on your time. It's only half an hour. And if there's a question that is a bit tricky like that one, probably move on and come back to it, right? There's like a forward arrow you can move on and because it's 12 you need to pass, right? So you don't need all to pass, you just need 12 and something that is maybe a bit confusing like that one, you can come back to it and choose the best possible answer out of that anyway. Yeah. All right. So the objectives in the policy of an environmental management system are set in order to indicate the long-term aims of the company, indicate the short-term aim of the company, indicate the commitment of the management, indicate the allocation of resources. So the best answer for this one is going to be C. I kind of making up some time, right? So we lost time there,
Yes.
right? Yeah, the
Yes.
best answer to that one is C, right? If there's one for debate again, I'll put it in the debate of it, right? But we have until 12 o'clock, but I don't want us to stick. I'm fearful that there are going to be other questions like that we have to sort of explain or trash out at the same time, right? So I don't want not to finish today. An impact is defined in British Standard European Norm. That's the meaning of these funny looking things. BS is British Standard, EN is European Norm, ISO 14001, 2004. For a large office building could include, which is an impact, energy used for heating and lighting. I'll have to explain this, I know this already. Water consumption in the toilets and canteens, the visible appearance to neighbors, all of these, right? So I think again, here's another one that need a bit of explanation. But anybody want to give it a guess if you know what an
It's
impact
all of
is?
the above. All of the above.
Okay, anybody else? An impact, energy used for heating and lighting, water consumption in toilets and canteen, the visible appearance to the neighbors. Anybody
D.
decided? Huh?
D.
D, okay. But let's talk about it because I don't think it's D. Right? I don't think it's D. So we need to say what an impact is. Right? So an impact, right? Remember, there's a difference between impact and aspect, right? So an aspect is the cause. Sorry, an aspect is the source. Can I just put it back here for you, right? An aspect, ESP, right? Aspect is the source, right? So, an aspect is the source. So energy use for heating and lighting, right? Water consumption in toilets and canteen. The impact is like the effect. The impact is like the effect. So we have aspect and impact, and one is the cause, one is the effect, right? So when you think of this, so are you writing this down? So the aspect is the source, right? So an impact for a large office building could include SOURCE, right? So a large office building, the impact could include energy use of heating and lighting, water consumption in toilets and canteen, the visual appearance to neighbors, and this is the effect. So take a look at that explanation and see if we could figure out now the acts of the impact. So which of those answers they speak to the effect? Which one, if it could, which one is an effect? In other words, then, right? In other words, I'm gonna try. You see, the thing I'm more fearful to remember we're not there for the day of the exam, but hopefully you get some repeated questions, right? So which is an effect? An effect is from my example, maybe from the course example, an effect would have been if you have smoke. The smoke would have caused, you could actually see the smoke could have caused coughing, right? So that's an impact because the impact is the effect, right? The impact is the effect. So which of these is an effect? Any ideas? Which is an effect? Like, yeah, so if I can ask you to say an answer, right? Because remember, there's just three of us here. So which one is better fits the example of an effect?
Sir, I'm thinking it would be A,
Aim.
long-term aims of the company.
I was thinking
Oh,
of
no, we're on question 5. We're on question 5.
the water consumption in the toilet and canteen, like the amount of water being reused. Or the visual appearances in
Yeah.
the
Hmm.
That's a tricky one.
Yeah, they are tricky ones, right? They are tricky ones. So the best answer here is actually C, because it's an effect. You see, they say visual appearance. It's like oil on the water there, like that's the effect. Right? If you go with the explanation of cause and effect, aspect and impact is an effect, right? So the energy use of heating and lighting could be normal. But when I say normal, like that is just, so that could be energy efficient. They didn't say it was bad, right? Water consumption in toilets and canteens, that could be, I guess in that sense that it's just normal usage then, right? But when they say the visual appearance to neighbors, it's like the effect of something. It's like the impact. Remember the thing, environmental impact and environmental impact assessment. So folks, you think you understand that it's an impact. It
And
is
it's
causing an effect. Think of the word impact, like an explosion then, right? So something is affecting something here, right? And the visual appearance, the neighbors would signify that there is something in the water then that shouldn't be there. Hence, it's going to cause an impact. Think you
Yeah.
understand that a bit?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So yeah. So you
I
see,
was
if they just had
confused.
said, yeah, if they had said you know, like water running in a stream, whatever, fine. But it didn't say that. They said the visual appearance. So then the residents, the neighbors have noticed something. There's oil, there's some bad smell, there's some chemical floating in the water. Pay attention to the word impact. So that one is going to create an impact. Now, in a way, A and B is causing an impact, but the better answer here is C because they mentioned visual appearance to the neighbors. And A and B could have been sustainably used and whatever have you, but A and B is not going to create that impact if it's sustainably used. But C is suggesting that something is in the water, hence there's an impact or an effect for, you know, what would have caused that possible contamination here. Yeah, all right. So this one is C. Yeah. Okay, good. We're going ahead. We're going ahead. Oh God, the next one is the same thing. The next one is aspect now. So, but this one you have to figure which is the source. I remember I told you that impact and aspect is bound to come for you, all right? Which are examples of environmental aspect? So aspect now is the source. Global warming is not a source. Global warming is an effect. Ozone depletion is not a source. That's an effect. Acid rain is not a source. Well, acid rain, like the source of acid rain could be like a factory then, a chimney, right? That releases the emission. But the acid rain itself is an effect, right? So A is wrong. Which of the following is an aspect? You have to think in your mind source, where it coming from, right? Emission released to the atmosphere, global warming, and noise nuisance. Now, this one kind of tricky. Emission released to the atmosphere is a source, but global warming is an effect, and noise nuisance is an effect. You're being impacted by that noise then, right? So that's how you know this B is also wrong, right? Emission released to the atmosphere, that's correct, because it's coming from, you can think of it coming from a pipe, a drain, effluent discharge, right? Discharge in the drain, yes. Generation of noise, yes. Because if it's the generation of noise, then that speaks to the source. You think you understand this one?
Yes, I got C there for that one.
Right. So this one, this one,
Let's see.
which are the examples of environmental aspect? You're thinking source. Climate change is not a source. That's an impact. Skin cancer is not a source. That's an impact. That's an effect. Noise nuisance is not a source. That's an impact. So the best answer here is going to be C, where everything is coming from, right? Emission released to the atmosphere, possibly from a chimney. Discharges to the drain, probably from an effluent pipe. Generation of noise from a generator, right? So then this one here, C talks about the source. So the best answer here for this one is going to be C, right? All right. Are we on number 7? Remember, we had to get 12 character pass. What number are we on? I'm seeing number 13 there. I wonder if we lost some questions. You look like we have
Yes, I
lost.
believe you did not send some of the pages with the numbers.
Oh, that's
So
that's
I
what
got
happened over the
that is
years.
what
Okay.
shows up here. That is what I have.
Yeah. Because you see, remember telling this, but when you look at when this was given to us, right? This is 2014. So folks, it mightn't matter the number, but what matters is the question, right? The question is a question nonetheless. So these are what we got. These are what we have over the years anyway, right? So it may not be a full flush 20, but we kind of make up wherever we got questions anyway, right? So the point is not, sorry, go ahead.
Did you send this on WhatsApp or email? I didn't get it.
I can't remember. It may have been via email. I don't
Yes,
think it
it
was on
was by
WhatsApp. Yeah.
email.
Yeah, it was an
It was-
email. Yeah. Check through and see, because I would have emailed everybody. Like when I sent it to one, I would have sent it to everybody. If y'all have it though, like while I'm teaching, if anybody have it and they could put it on the WhatsApp group, that'd be very good because I'll keep on my teaching anyway.
Somebody
If you
can
do that,
please.
say it again.
I said I'll be happy if someone can send it for me. I
Yeah,
didn't get
if you have it on your email, if you could just put it on the WhatsApp group, if you all know how to do that, you could just do that for me and I will keep on teaching anyway. All right. I'll check the group when the class finishes to see if you all do it, right? And if not, afterwards, I will just email back everybody the question, right? So, which is not a normal impact of environmental noise, right?
Which is not a normal.
which is not a normal impact of environmental noise. You want to have a look at this one? You see how, you see the questions are a bit tricky, isn't it, right? So what is not a normal impact of environmental noise? They have damage to hearing, loss of sleep, causation of stress, nuisance to neighbors, which is not a normal impact of environmental noise. You may want to like while you study, right? I mean, I can know like we can't slow down because I could 11:40 already, right? But like if you're looking back at the question, what I suggest is that you go to your book because you'll see how they have it there now. You'll see like how they have environmental noise, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is some of the answers are kind of based on the theory in the book, right? So they have, I think I lost it, sorry. They have environmental noise in your textbook, even though I've lost the page, right? So you could probably use your book to help you decide on which is the best possible answer, right?
I would go with nuisance to the neighbors.
Right.
Which is not a normal impact. Don't
Yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is that you would need to use your notes to guide you with these answers. You can't just use common knowledge then, right? In other words, the questions is based on the theory. Trying to find the page and I can't find it because they have this in the book, right? They have this on page is it 63? Yeah, 63. Sources of environmental noise. They have residential neighbors. So they say which is not a normal impact. So then, which is not a normal impact. So then if you look at your book, right? Sources of environmental noise. So then the neighbors is residential neighbors is an impact or is an effect then or is an impact, right? So D is actually the one which is not a normal, but D is normal. And if you look through the book, what you're going to see, you are going to see, stress, you are going to see, you might take my word for it. I'm trying to see if I can show you but this is why you need your book then, right? You are going to see things like, I'm trying to find something. I'm seeing heavy industry, right? Page 63. So when you start to study, you need to use your book, right? You have transport, engine noise on motorways can travel hundreds of meters at night. We can hear often hear traffic noise from the roads that are miles away. And this may lead to things like loss of sleep. So then loss of sleep is a normal effect of environmental noise, right? Anybody get where I'm going with this? So then we can say B and D is wrong. What about causes of stress? I think that is also, if you have loud music, if you have dog barking. So I'm not sure if you catch this one, because it's environmental noise, then damage to hearing is the weird one. You think you understand what? And that one look like the correct one. But remember, we're not talking about occupational noise. We are talking about environmental noise. Damage to hearing have to be sort of chronic and sort of over a certain decibel. We're talking about noise like from the industries. But they didn't say noise from the industries. They say noise from the environment, which is like road traffic, playing hard music, right? But the neighbors then. So which is not a normal impact of environmental noise. It's such a strange answer because the answer here would work out to be A. But did you all catch how strange it was? Yeah, A is the best answer. Because damage to hearing is, so you'll understand that is associated with occupational noise.
noise, yeah.
But this is not that. This is, what is environmental noise? The book mentioned playing music, dog barking. That is environmental noise, right? Environmental noise is the dogs barking, vehicles passing in the road. Now the decibel level for that is not going to be 80 decibel. Well, I guess music from the neighbors maybe, but it's not the same as it's not going to be consistent then, like 8 hours of the day. At least hopefully not, or 8 hours of the night, hopefully not. And if it's just one night they play such hard music, it's probably not going to be every night, right? So such a strange one that this one, the answer would end up being A. Like when you look at it, you probably thought A is definitely the one that's not going to be it. But the fact is, loss of sleep is associated with environmental noise, causation of stress, the nuisance to the neighbors. That is environmental noise, playing loud music, the dogs barking, vehicles passing on the road. That is environmental noise. So the best one here would actually be A, right? All right, number 14. Well, not number 14. I'm not too sure what number it is, what number we reach, right? Which is not, oh, sorry, is that the same thing again? Sorry, no.
Which is mostly.
Sorry, yeah. Which is most likely to be classified as hazardous waste? Well, this should be easy, man, right? Which one sounds bad? Hazardous waste, right? Paper and other combustible materials, that is non-hazardous. Liquids, they didn't say what kind of liquid. Used tires, used tires could be it, but you see, they mentioned highly flammable, so then this is the obvious one. They didn't give an option to say C and D. So the best answer here is D. Anything that sounds bad, flammable, toxic, corrosive, that is hazardous, right? So then D is the answer here. Used tires may go under the category of inert because it doesn't do nothing as far as I know. Rubber doesn't degrade. I mean, it probably would degrade, but it doesn't do anything, right? And so the used tires, I mean, it could have probably been just tires if you ask me, but I didn't set the question, right? But the fact that this one is obvious, the fact they say highly flammable liquids, the best answer here is D, right? Waste management requires that the waste is segregated. Segregation means that the waste is reused at the site of production. No, the waste is sorted out into various types and stored separately. Yes. The waste is sent to a recycling facility. No. The waste is mixed with inert waste. No. The best answer here is B, right? The waste is sorted out into various types and stored separately. All right. So some of them get a little bit, I mean, but you see how they are a bit tricky. And again, that's why we said this is an exam. The thing is, anything in NEBOSH is going to be challenging, but you're going to have to study a bit, right? The principle of recycling applies to electrical waste, packaging waste, hazardous waste, all waste. I would just go with B, packaging waste. I don't think they recycle electrical components like plugs and sockets and breakers and stuff. Maybe
No.
they do certain materials from it, but because we have packaging waste as an obvious answer here, we're just going to go with that one, right? Plastics then, I mean, to make it better, right? All right, the least acceptable method of waste disposal from the environmental point of view is which one? Which one is the hierarchy? Which is the least acceptable method
Recycling.
from the hierarchy of control? The least one. Like the least one means the last one.
Disposing. That's the last on the hierarchy.
Right, but so if you want to read it, so what does it say in disposal? Like what does it involve?
Landfilling and incineration.
Okay, so landfilling, right?
energy and
So
recovery.
then, yeah. So then the landfill is the best one, right? A is the best answer here. Okay. Anybody have any doubts about one?
No.
Okay, good. All right. So hopefully I create the impression that we have to do some studies, right? Okay. Large volumes of oil must be stored. So here's my oil example coming back, right? Large volume of oil must be stored in a container inside a barn. That sounds correct to me. Co-located with any other hazardous substances on site? No. Within a secured building?
No.
Probably not. I mean, it's volumes of oil, so we know we're thinking bond already, right? Adjacent to an oil receptor. Jeez, this one is even close. Adjacent to an oil interceptor on the. So this was like my thing though. The interceptor on the drainage system. But it said stored. and you don't really want to store oil next to anything. So maybe the best way is in a tank within a bond, right? So I think I'll go with the obvious answer. The best thing here is always going to be a bond. Technically, D, I think, is also very close. But then you see the problem is why you want it close to a drainage system for. Because you don't want it getting the drains in the first place. And you don't want it next to, why would you put large volumes of oil next to an interceptor? The interceptor is like a remedial measure. But, again, I didn't set the question. I would always say when you say large volume of oil, you want it in a bond anyway, which is a collection pit, right? D is kind of close, but then it shouldn't be close to any drainage system anyway, right? The question for this one is missing. That question is actually missing. I can't remember what it was, right? That's how the papers lose over the years then anyway. What used to happen, by the way, it was face-to-face. We used to copy this and give it to students, and it looked as if our original got lost. Well, probably before the pandemic. This is the first time I kind of realized this anyway, because I always thought that these were the original papers, but I guess, we would copy them and give them out when we had face-to-face classes, right? But I could suggest that the original here may have been lost, which is why this top of this one is gone anyway, right? Number two, whatever is this paper, right? Which is not part of an organism's habitat. So the question is here, what is a habitat? Right? What is a habitat? A habitat, anybody remember what that is?
Where something lives and it's comfortable, where you can always find it and it have food.
Yeah. I've seen somebody circle respiration on this. Which is not part of an organism's habitat. So shelter, food, and water would be correct because that's part of where the organism lives, right?
Yeah.
Respiration, I think is the odd one. But, living things need to, need to breathe or respire. But perhaps there are organisms or there are bacteria and stuff that probably doesn't do that, right? So, but they said organism. I don't think a bacteria is classed as an organism. A bacteria is one cell. But the best one here is going to be D, which is not part of the organism habitat. Shelter is part of where the organism lives. Food is where it lives. Water is where it lives. Perhaps this is a crappy question. I didn't send the question paper, right? But perhaps there are organisms out there that don't require respiration talks about oxygen, right? Respiration is oxygen. So, perhaps it doesn't need the oxygen, it uses another gas, uses nitrogen, right? There are some bacteria I could think about that do that, like nitrogen fixing bacteria. And nitrogen fixing bacteria is found in root crops, right? And so like they would be found in root crops like cassava. I guess cassava is a good example. So you can say that that organism, if we can call it that, because I'm thinking more like a bacteria, right? But a bacteria could be more than one cell, I think. I'm not quite sure, but I know bacteria can be one cell, like one cell in terms of their structure. Perhaps they are more than one cell. If it's more than one cell, they are classed as an organism, right? So that's how it is. So shelter, food, water, I think is correct. The point there was that maybe some organisms doesn't use oxygen in respiration, but they may use nitrogen. So in a way, then they don't all need oxygen, right? So that's a strange question, but I think that may be the best possible answer there. What do you all think? Because I mean, it must need water, right? I think everything on the planet needs water, whatever is that source. But I could think of,
Shelter.
say it again.
It's a shelter.
No, but that's which is not part of the organism habitat. But the definition of habitat is where something lives. So then you need, like the shelter is where it stays now. So shelter is the home then. So shelter is the habitat. Not to shelter is where it lives. right? So if it's living in root crops, but that is classed as a shelter for that organism, the shelter is the home. Think you understand that?
Yeah.
A starfish, Patrick starfish, that lives, Patrick starfish that lives in the coral reefs then, right? So the coral reef is the shelter. A habitat is where an organism lives, but which is not part of the organism habitat. So it must live somewhere. And like the place it lives then is classed as the shelter, the coral reef, the cassava, yeah. Because otherwise it'd be living in space. But if and I do believe I do believe that, I mean, but if you're living in space, right? I mean space as in, but that's still your shelter because that's where you live in, right? So which is not part of the organism habitat. Shelter is part of it. Food is part of it. Water is part of it, right?
And
But what I'm
right.
saying, there are bacteria and maybe like other organisms that don't use oxygen in the process of respiration, right? But like, okay, like plants then, plants don't use oxygen, don't they? Plants use carbon dioxide. A plant is an organism, but it's not classed as an organism. But if you think of it as a cell structure, it has many cells. But plants, if you talk about seaweed, right, or certain, like moss or whatever have you, said grows in a certain condition and it grows in a certain water-based condition. So that seaweed is going to be its shelter, right? And it's going to have food and microscopic plankton and whatever have you. But that probably don't need oxygen in the process because plants don't use oxygen, they use carbon dioxide. So plants don't go through respiration, they go through photosynthesis. So that's why I'm saying respiration is the weird one here. But again, plants may not be the best example here, but then you do have certain plants, that plants is the best example to explain it to you because I can't think of an organism other than the nitrogen fixing bacteria that doesn't even use oxygen, it uses nitrogen. So then that process is not called respiration. I'm not too sure what that process is called, right? I would have forgotten my general sciences a long time ago, right? But I think the best one here is going to be D because not all organisms on the planet use oxygen. Trees don't use it at all. Trees give out oxygen. Trees manufacture oxygen. Trees go through photosynthesis. But a tree lives somewhere. If it's in the rainforest, so if we talk about, tree lives somewhere, right? And then, it will take in its water and nutrients and whatever have you, but it don't need the oxygen because it creates the oxygen. What do you think of the exam? Tricky, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, boy. So you see why we had this study, right? I think I have 2 minutes again. Let me try to wrap this thing up. If I finish, look, we didn't get to finish, we didn't get to finish at all, right? But I can only safely probably do one more question anyway, right? So the concept of sustainable development, the concept of sustainability
Like,
when applied to purchasing electrical equipment means considering the whole life cost of the product. Buying the cheapest product, but that's wrong. So B is wrong. Buying the product with the lowest running cost, that's also wrong. Buying the product locally, maybe, but considering the whole life cost of the product is sustainable purchasing because that's what they asked, right? In the book they had it as if you check the book and you get some time, they have it as a life cycle analysis of the product. Life cycle analysis. Right? Look at on pages
13.
34. Right? A life cycle analysis, right? So you can squeeze in another one. An individual can help their employer reach environmental targets by arriving at work on time. Probably not. You probably reach safety targets, but not environmental targets, right? Switching power off when items are not in use. That could probably work. Recording injuries in the accident book. This is more safety, so this is not it. Ensuring that all vehicles is swept. Ensure that all waste is swept into the same bin. No, so the best one here is B. For switching off the power when items are not in use. I'm gonna try to steal one more. That question is missing to the top there again. Who should represent the company to the media in the event of an emergency? The most senior manager on site? The person who found or reported the problem? No. The person dealing with the cleanup? No. The regulator? No. The regulator is like OSHA. So, I mean, they shouldn't represent your company. It's the most senior manager on site, right? Let's see what's happened here. The avoidance of pollution due to spills of oil when filling tank is best achieved by the provision of absorbent materials and sandbags. The sandbag thing was here, the sandbox I mentioned to you all. Training operatives in handling procedures. The avoidance of pollution when filling tanks is best achieved by the provision of interceptors on the drainage system, separation of foul and surface draining water, right? Some of these are obviously wrong, right? So I think D is wrong. I think A is wrong because A is a reactive measure. So is either going to be B or C, right? But they say avoid. The avoidance of pollution due to spills of oil when filling tanks. You see, again, this question is vague because we don't know the size of the tank. So suppose it's a big industrial tank, then interceptors would have been best. But if it's a small tank and you fill it training operatives and handling procedures, we don't know the size of this tank, but I see B here, so I'll go with this because perhaps if you're trained, it's gonna have a better handling techniques anyway, right? So B may be the best answer here, but again, the question is a vague question because we don't know the size of those tanks anyway, right? But it's going to be a void, right? Like this one here, the provision of interceptors, that's actually reactive. That's like you're thinking you're going to have a spill, right? So if you're having a spill, that's a reactive measure to sort of deal with the spill. But the only one here that's proactive, hence the word avoidance, is training. And training is always going to be proactive or avoiding anyway, right? That's a wrap. Trying to get the rule here. We would. Well,
Sorry, I have
quiz,
a question. When is exam?
question anybody, or is it just background noise?
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
When is exam?
That's a good question. Because I don't have the answer. NEBOSH has to set the exam day, right? So the exam is not going to be in a hurry, right? The exam may actually be in September. However, we are officially finished with the course. Now, the reason for that, let me stop the recording here.